7 months ago, my life felt like it had taken a magical turn when I met him. From the very first moment, he seemed like someone out of a storybook, charming in a way that made my heart skip a beat. He had a way of making me feel special, like I was the only person in the world who mattered. It wasn't just his charm, it was the little things he did that left me amazed. If I casually mentioned that I needed help with something, he'd show up with the perfect solution. When I was stressed about work or unsure about a decision, he'd share advice so thoughtful that it felt like he truly understood me. Even when it came to small things, like a book I wanted or a snack I loved, he'd surprise me with it, as if he could read my mind. What stood out the most was his generosity. He wasn't just giving me material things, he gave me time, attention, and the feeling that I could rely on him. Every act of kindness seemed meaningful, like he wasn't just trying to impress me but genuinely cared. It was hard not to be swept away by someone who seemed to have all the answers and a heart so open. Looking back, those early days felt like a dream. But dreams, I would soon learn, sometimes come with shadows you don't notice at first. But there was something unusual about him too, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. We rarely talked on the phone, even though I would have loved to hear his voice more often. Instead, he always sent me audio messages or texts. At first, I brushed it off, telling myself he was probably just busy. After all, he seemed like the kind of person who always had a lot going on. For a while, I didn't let it bother me. His messages were warm and thoughtful, and I convinced myself that this was simply how he preferred to communicate. Everyone has their quirks, I thought. But as the weeks turned into months, the pattern started to feel strange. No matter how much time we spent texting or exchanging voice notes, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. Why didn't he ever pick up when I called? Was he avoiding something, or was it really just a matter of convenience? The more I tried to ignore the questions in my head, the louder they seemed to grow. It was as if there was a wall between us, one that I couldn't see but could definitely feel. I've always believed that communication is the foundation of any good relationship. I wanted to feel closer to him, so I tried calling more often. But every time, he would complain. He'd say he was too busy for calls or that he preferred to send voice notes instead. When I asked him about it, he would brush it off with some excuse, but deep down, it left me feeling uneasy. Yet, he never held back when it came to helping me financially or giving me advice. It was as though he wanted to keep me close but at a distance too. And as much as I tried to convince myself that his way of communicating was just his style, doubt started creeping in. One evening, I decided to test the waters and told him I felt a bit distant. I wanted to be honest. He responded, but his answer didn't comfort me. He said, "You know I'm not a big talker, this is just how I am. Don't you appreciate everything else I do for you?" He was right in a way. He had done so much for me, and I kept reminding myself of all the ways he had been there. Maybe I was being too sensitive, too demanding. I told myself over and over that no one was perfect, that I should be grateful for all the things he had already done. But deep down, a tiny voice refused to be silenced. It kept asking the same question: if he really cared, why couldn't he make the effort to communicate in the way I needed? As time went on, I started noticing more things that didn't feel right. Everything seemed to revolve around him. We only met when it was convenient for him, and if I tried to plan something special or suggest a spontaneous outing, there was always an excuse. "I'm too busy," he'd say. Or, "Let's stick to what we already planned." It was as if he wanted control over every aspect of our relationship, leaving little room for my ideas or feelings. Yes, he was supportive in many ways, always ready to help when I needed advice or financial assistance. But even his support felt carefully measured, as though he had invisible boundaries I wasn't allowed to cross. It was like being given a gift with strings attached, and no matter how much I tried to adjust or compromise, I couldn't shake the growing feeling that something was missing, something vital that made love feel real. Still, I held on, hoping he'd open up. I kept waiting for that breakthrough moment, thinking that maybe he'd let me in. But nothing changed. Then, I hit a breaking point. One weekend, I tried calling him, just to chat, to hear his voice. He ignored the call, only to send me a message a few minutes later: "You know I don't like calls. Please, stick to messages." I felt hurt, but I didn't reply. Instead, I started thinking more seriously about what I wanted from a relationship. Maybe I'd been looking for the wrong things, settling for someone who couldn't meet me halfway. The next week, I decided I needed answers. I wanted to know why he was so distant, why he seemed so unreachable. I figured if he wouldn't give me those answers, I'd find them myself. So, I did something I had never done before. I tracked him down. It wasn't hard to find him. I knew his routine like the back of my hand, where he went after work, the cafe he always stopped by for his favorite coffee, the gym he visited on Fridays. All I had to do was wait and watch. Part of me felt uneasy about what I was doing, but another part was desperate for answers. And then, I saw him. He was sitting at a small table in the corner of the cafe, laughing and leaning in close to a woman I had never seen before. They were sharing a moment so warm, so effortless, that it caught me off guard. She smiled at him, her hand brushing his arm, and he didn't pull away. Instead, he leaned closer, his face lighting up in a way I had never witnessed when he was with me. My heart felt like it stopped. I froze, unable to move, as a wave of betrayal washed over me. Who was she? How long had this been going on? A million questions swirled in my mind, each one sharper and more painful than the last. They looked too close, closer than we had ever been. For a few moments, I just stood there, my eyes glued to them. Memories of all the times he had been distant, unavailable, or unwilling to let me in began to replay in my mind. The excuses he gave, the cold responses, the carefully controlled interactions, it all started to make sense now. I felt a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, humiliation. How could I have been so blind? How could I have let myself believe that what we had was special, that he was just different and needed time? Every doubt I had ever pushed aside came rushing back, and in that moment, the truth became clear. I had been holding on to an illusion, while he had been giving his attention to someone else. I confronted him that night. He didn't try to deny it. He said he was sorry, but that he never really saw our relationship as something serious. He claimed that he thought I understood that he wasn't the type for commitment. His words hit me like a slap. How could he think I'd be okay with that? How could he believe I would settle for anything less than real love? I walked away, tears streaming down my face, feeling lost and confused. I had invested so much of myself into this relationship, hoping that he would change, hoping that he would finally let me in. But all along, he'd kept me at a distance, only giving me just enough to keep me around. I spent the next few days thinking about everything that had happened, replaying moments in my mind, and trying to understand why I had ignored the red flags. The pain was unbearable, but slowly, I started to realize something important. I deserved more. I deserved someone who wouldn't keep me at arm's length, someone who would want to share their life with me fully, not in bits and pieces. I told myself that I would never settle again. I would never let anyone treat me like a convenience, like something they could pick up and put down when they pleased. As the days passed, I found myself missing him less and less. I realized that it wasn't him I missed, but the idea of who I thought he was. I missed the dream of a relationship that was never really there. I started focusing on myself, on my own happiness, and on my own goals. I threw myself into my work and began to surround myself with friends who genuinely cared about me. It felt good to be in control of my life again, without feeling dependent on anyone else's approval or affection. Months went by, and I grew stronger. I began to look at that relationship as a lesson, a painful one, but a valuable one. It taught me to listen to my instincts, to trust my gut when something felt wrong, and to demand respect and honesty from anyone I allowed into my life. One evening, I got a message from him. He wanted to meet up, to talk things over. He said he'd realized he had made a mistake and wanted to apologize in person. I thought about it for a while, wondering if seeing him would open old wounds or if it would finally bring me closure. In the end, I agreed to meet him. When we sat down, he seemed different, almost regretful. He apologized, saying he realized how unfair he had been. He said he missed me, that he wanted to try again and do things right. But I had changed. I no longer saw him as someone I wanted or needed in my life. I told him I accepted his apology, but that I had moved on. I told him I needed more than what he could offer and that I had found peace in my independence. He looked disappointed, but I could see that he understood. I walked away from that conversation feeling lighter, like I had closed a chapter of my life that had weighed me down for too long. Moving on wasn't easy, but with each day, I felt stronger, more confident. I started focusing on what truly mattered to me, setting goals for myself that didn't depend on anyone else's validation. I found myself smiling more, laughing with friends, and enjoying the freedom of being alone. I didn't need someone to make me happy. I had learned to find that happiness within myself. People often asked me if I was ready to date again, but I wasn't in a hurry. I wanted to take my time, to focus on me, and to be fully whole before letting anyone else into my heart. Reflecting on that relationship made me realize that love should never be one-sided. Real love is about openness, trust, and vulnerability. It's about being seen, heard, and valued, things he could never give me. One evening, as I watched the sunset, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I had finally let go of the hurt, the disappointment, and the lingering doubts. I was free. I promised myself that I would never settle again, that I would never ignore my needs just to keep someone else comfortable. I knew what I deserved now, and I wasn't afraid to wait for it. My journey wasn't about finding someone else to fill the void, it was about learning to love myself enough to never allow anyone to treat me like an option. I was worthy of so much more. Looking back, I'm grateful for the experience, even though it was painful. It taught me valuable lessons about self-worth, boundaries, and the power of walking away. I am stronger now, ready for whatever comes next, and, most importantly, at peace with myself.